My name is Jordan Williams. I'm 41 years old, a lieutenant general with U.S. Cyber Command. But tonight, none of that mattered. I walked into our 20-year high school reunion wearing a plain navy sheath dress and low heels. The valet barely looked at me. Inside, the Pinecrest ballroom glittered with chandeliers and curated laughter. People I once beat at debate club now ran law firms or sat on Senate committees. My sister Lena stood on stage radiant in red basking in their applause. To them, I was no one, just the girl who enlisted after sophomore year and vanished into desert wars. And that was exactly how I planned it, until my encrypted phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. My name is Jordan Williams. I'm a lieutenant general in U.S. Cyber Command, but tonight that title is tucked away beneath a navy sheath dress and a thin smile that doesn't reach my eyes. As I pull up to the Pinecrest Resort Valet Circle, headlights sweep across marble columns and the massive glass entryway. The valet boy couldn't be more than 19 gives me a perfunctory nod, eyes already searching for the next Mercedes or Tesla. I murmur thanks, hand him my keys, and slip my clutch under my arm. Inside Pinecrest is all polished travertine and crystal. Chandeliers drip from vaulted ceilings like frozen rain, scattering light onto glossy floors, buffed to a mirror shine. The reception area is empty. Everyone's already inside the grand ballroom, where the laughter is warm, rich, unbothered. I pause, breathing in the sharp scent of lemon wax and orchids arranged in tall glass towers. The concierge hands me a name tag, generic black print on white sticker stock. Jordan Williams. No rank, no title, no weight. I peel off the backing and slap it onto my chest like a label on clearance produce. Across the lobby, double doors stand open. Beyond them, the ballroom glows golden under soft chandeliers. I hear clinking glasses, peals of laughter, and the MC's voice booming something about excellence and legacy. My stomach tightens, a reflex I've spent years learning to override. Combat training teaches you how to manage fear. Family teaches you how to swallow humiliation. I enter. The grand ballroom is dressed like a wedding scene from a magazine. Ivory linens, gold charger plates, 6-tier cake glittering on a pedestal under spotlights. At the far end, a massive screen plays slideshows on loop. Debate team champions, prom queens in satin dresses, the annual DC trip group photo, faces laughing at the Lincoln Memorial at each other at the camera. And there she is, Lena, my sister. Center frame in half the slides, her auburn hair a dark flame against every backdrop. I find myself in exactly 3 photos. In one, I'm wearing a Navy orchestra dress, second violin, tucked under my chin, hair tied back in a neat knot. In another debate club, my mouth open, mid-argument, eyes sharp with strategy. In the last, a blurry candid of me reading alone by the window, oblivious to the lens. 3 fleeting frames in 12 minutes of curated memory. Jordan, a woman, shrieks from near the cake table. Bright smile, expensive tan hair pinned back with a diamond clip. I blink. Emma. Cheer captain turned luxury realtor. She pulls me into a scented hug, her perfume cloying and pink. Oh my God, I almost didn't recognize you. You look practical. Practical! The word lands with that soft cruelty only old classmates can master. It's just a dress, I say. Well, you always were efficient. She chirps, then turns away her attention already, pulled by the next reunion handshake. I stand there for a moment, clutching my water glass like a lifeline. My ring, the one from West Point, presses against my skin beneath the sleeve. No one here will see it tonight. That's the plan. Across the room, Lena is holding court near the stage. Her red sheath dress slices through the crowd like a command. Her laughter carries easily. Always did. She was born for rooms like this, rooms with chandeliers and curated applause. I was born for war rooms, underground bunkers, silent satellite feeds blinking red with crisis. But no one here knows that. To them, I'm just Jordan Williams, orchestra nerd, debate team prodigy, the girl who enlisted at 17 and never came back. Jason Hart, former prom king current hedge fund executive, spots me from 2 tables over. He saunters across the floor, drink in hand, suit, crisp, that smirk still welded to his face after 2 decades. "Becca, sorry, Jordan," he drawls. "Still stationed in the desert, or did they finally promote you to paper pusher in Kansas?" I force a tight smile. "Nice to see you too, Jason." He laughs like it's charming. "Come on, I'm just joking. Seriously, didn't you do pre-law? What happened there?" Before I can answer, a woman in pearls leans toward her husband, stage whispering, "Didn't she drop out of law school? Shame. So much potential." Their words don't sting like they used to. Not after 20 years in war zones commanding cyber operatives under blackout conditions, signing off on ops that will never be declassified. Words can't kill you. Silence can. Complacency can. But words, they're just another form of noise. I find my name card at table 14, back row near the exit beside the buffet trays. The front tables are embossed with gold Dr. Kaminsky, Senator, Hill Lena Williams, DOJ, Deputy Director. My place card is plain white printed in Times New Roman, curling slightly at the edges. I sit down. The shrimp cocktail in front of me is half-eaten by someone who's wandered off to network. I study the crowd. Laughter peals, toasts or raised camera flashes pop. Lena sweeps through groups with practiced grace, clasping hands, touching arms lightly, each gesture calculated for warmth and dominance. When her eyes finally land on me, her smile flickers. For a moment, I see the sister who used to braid my hair before school, whisper secrets to me under navy blue sheets, while a thunderstorm rattled the old windows. Then it's gone. She approaches, voice bright. "Jordan, you came. I almost didn't recognize you in that vintage navy. It's just a dress," I say again. She tilts her head, lips curling. "Well, you've always been understated." That word again. Understated, practical, efficient. To them, synonyms for invisible. She leans in, whispers low enough for only me to hear. "We should talk sometime. I'm sure you have stories somewhere." I lift my glass water, trembling slightly in my grip. "Only the quiet ones," I say. She laughs high and polished and sweeps away to her circle of admirers. I watch her go back ramrod straight. My phone buzzes in my clutch. Secure ping. Encrypted. Priority level Echo 5. My heartbeat evens out. Steady. Grounded. Purpose flickers back to life in my chest. To them, I'm no one in a clearance rack dress. But I know better. And that's exactly how I planned it. My phone buzzes again. A silent vibration against the soft lining of my clutch. I glance down. Encrypted text flashes across the screen, harsh and precise, auto-deleting. After 3 seconds, Echo 5 urgent. Merlin breach escalation. Immediate advisory requested. I take a slow sip of water, feeling the chilled liquid slip down my throat, anchoring me in the moment. The words settle in my chest like a dropped stone, their weight rippling outward through old scars and silent vows. Around me, the ballroom hums with curated opulence. Gold light spills across linen-draped tables. Crystal glasses catch the chandeliers and refract them into 1,000 shards of artificial stars. Expensive perfume coils through the air. Magnolia oud ambergris, an invisible signature of old money and curated power. The MC steps to the microphone, voice booming with pre-rehearsed gravitas. "And now, please join me in welcoming tonight's distinguished alumni honoree, Lena Cole." Applause detonates like distant gunfire, sharp and synchronized. I set my glass down carefully, aligning its base with the edge of my napkin, as Lena rises from her front table. She moves with practiced fluidity, scarlet dress hugging her frame like poured silk hair, twisted into a sleek knot that reveals the sculptural lines of her face. Diamond earrings glitter with every camera flash like tiny explosions of ice. She looks radiant, powerful, designed for the spotlight, the kind of woman headlines crave and boardrooms cultivate. I watch her wrap her fingers around the microphone with clinical precision. Her smile is blinding, her voice honed to a polished brass timbre that carries to every corner of the hall. "Thank you all." She begins, pausing to let their reverence crystallize. "I'm deeply honored to receive this year's Distinguished Alumni Award. After 15 years at the Department of Justice, I've recently been appointed Deputy Director for Western Cyber Oversight." The cheers erupt uncontained now. People stand clapping harder, louder, desperate to prove they too are part of her orbit. I remain seated, my hands fold in my lap, thumbs brushing against each other, feeling the rough ridge of a healed scar across my knuckle. She scans the room, her eyes bright with triumph, and something sharper lurking just beneath. "But I'll never forget where it started," she continues, voice dipping into a manufactured vulnerability. "Right here at Pinecrest High." And of course she pauses, her smile slicing the air cleanly. "I have to thank my sister Jordan, who is with us tonight, for always being uniquely herself." A polite chuckle ripples through the crowd, uncertain if they've just heard affection or disdain. I don't flinch. Lena's true brilliance was never courtroom strategy or departmental leadership. Her brilliance was weaponizing praise-taking kindness, polishing it and twisting it until it cut deepest. My phone buzzes again, another silent ping vibrating against my palm. I flick my eyes downward. "Joint Chiefs Unofficial. Awaiting your consult before 400. I exhale slowly, letting the sound dissolve into the applause. Around me, guests raise glasses, lean into each other's perfume-laced shadows, faces shining with the fervor of collective worship. To them, Lena is the pinnacle of achievement, the proof that confidence and ruthlessness can bend the world into any shape they desire. To me, she is the echo of a world I chose to leave behind. I glance toward the ballroom doors. The chandeliers overhead fracture my reflection into 1,000 tiny versions of myself. None of them look back with fear, only clarity. The decision is easy. Duty over discomfort. Mission over memory. On stage, Lena thanks her Harvard professors and DOJ mentors, pausing for each round of applause with well-timed humility. Her voice rises and falls like an orchestral arrangement designed to elicit maximum reverence. I slip my phone back into my clutch and stand. My chair scrapes softly against the parquet floor, but no one notices over the crescendo of adoration. I smooth the front of my navy dress, adjust the sleeve that conceals my West Point ring, and walk out, heels clicking a quiet, deliberate rhythm only I can hear. Outside, the air is cooler, cleaner. The marble lobby is empty, echoing with faint, distant applause that fades behind heavy doors. Another message pings as I approach the exit. This one flagged in urgent red, "Top secret Psi TK. Merlin intercept window closing. Your eyes needed on target vectors within the hour." The notification dissolves before the elevator chime finishes its polite note. My pulse steadies. Adrenaline blooms cold and clear behind my eyes, sharpening everything into a crystalline now. People think tonight was about Lena. They think I came to watch her rise. They think my silence is submission. They're wrong. My mission never ended. And tonight, while they toast her victories under chandeliers, the world is about to remember why I never needed a stage to change its course. I step onto the balcony outside the ballroom, pulling the heavy glass door shut behind me. The applause dims instantly, muffled into a vague, distant thrum against the thick pane. Out here, the air is dark and clean, laced with the faint scent of pine sap, chlorinated sprinklers, and freshly cut grass. The golf course stretches beyond the terrace in silent, disciplined rows of shadowed green. Moonlight catches on dewdrops scattered across the fairway, each one a trembling silver star clinging to earth. I set my clutch down on the cold stone railing, its leather surface soft against granite. Both hands grip the edge as if grounding myself in this moment. The stone is chilled from the night air, pressing cool clarity into my skin. My phone buzzes again against my hip. Another silent vibration. Another encrypted escalation. Another reminder that somewhere else people are waiting for decisions only I can make. For a moment, no answer. For a moment, I just breathe. Through the glass door, I see Lena still on stage, framed in golden chandeliers and white uplights. Her red dress burns bright against ivory drapes, hair sculpted into a perfect chignon that gleams with hairspray sheen. She looks unstoppable, like victory incarnate. Around her, old teachers dab tears of pride from lined cheeks. Classmates raise glasses in reverent tribute. Photographers angle for a hero's silhouette. She is the sun in every room, illuminating, consuming, worshipped. I was never the sun. I was the quiet orbit, unseen, unlit, necessary only because gravity must exist for her light to hold. My mind flickers away from crystal chandeliers to concrete command bunkers, to battlefield briefing rooms lit by flickering fluorescent tubes, to sandstorm nights at Bagram, when the walls trembled with distant artillery and we worked by red-filtered headlamps, eyes gritty with fatigue and resolve. I think of silent hours, hunched over threat matrices, caffeine, and discipline, the only things keeping me upright. I think of the agents who never came home, the final go orders. I whispered over encrypted comms, the names that were never recorded, the missions that never officially happened. I close my eyes. For a moment, there is a dangerous softness in me, a whisper that says, "Stay here. Stay hidden on this quiet balcony. Let someone else carry it tonight. Let someone else save the day. You've carried enough." My phone buzzes again. A third ping. This time the vibration feels heavier, vibrating against bone, vibrating against conscience. I open my eyes. The screen flashes with a final urgent line. "Cole, we need you in DC by 0400. Failure window T minus 5 hours. No substitutes." My breath leaves me in a controlled exhale. The moonlight sharpens the edges of my reflection in the glass. I study her, the woman standing alone in a navy dress, hair pinned back with military precision posture. Straight despite the tired ache carved into her shoulders. Out here, away from Lena's spotlight, and away from my own command centers, I almost look normal. Almost. I reach for my phone thumb hovering above the secure unlock. My pulse slows not out of calm, but out of calculation. Because this moment of refusal, of rebellion, of wanting to say no is all I ever allow myself. A pause. A breath. A fleeting wish for a life that doesn't demand sacrifice at every turn. Then duty slices clean through, longing, as it always does. I unlock the phone. The screen floods with cascading lines of intel breach vectors and tactical overlays. My reflection disappears under encrypted data streams glowing cold blue against my skin. Behind me, beyond the glass, Lena's laughter rises again, warm and triumphant, carried faintly by the drifting breeze. I turn away from it, pressing my back against the cool stone wall, letting its solid presence anchor me to purpose. Refusal was never really an option. The call always finds me. Because this was never about her applause or their approval. It was never about family dinners or alumni lists or being remembered in maroon and gold yearbooks. It has always been about the mission. And the mission never ends. The glass door slid open behind me with a soft hiss of hydraulics. I didn't turn. The night air shifted as someone stepped onto the balcony. A faint scent of old books, chalk dust, and mint aftershave reached me before his voice did. "Jordan." I closed my eyes for a moment, recognizing the cadence instantly. I turned. There he was. Professor Halloran. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders stooped under a charcoal wool blazer, gray hair combed back in thin, neat lines. But his eyes, steel blue sharp behind half-rimmed glasses, hadn't dulled at all. Professor, I said softly, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Do I still get to call you that? He asked with a crooked smile. Or should I say, General Williams? A beat of silence fell between us. Then I laughed quiet short the sound, startling even to me. No one here knows that title. I said, gesturing toward the ballroom. They think I peaked in debate club. He chuckled, stepping to the railing beside me. His gaze swept across the silent golf course below the dark tree line beyond. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The ballroom noise dimmed behind, glass and distance. The moon sat low. A silver sentinel over pine and manicured grass. You were always a strategist, he said finally. I still remember your thesis on asymmetric warfare. Victory isn't about force, you wrote. It's about vision. I blinked that sentence echoing down 20 years of classified briefings, war rooms, and encrypted channels. I wrote that at 16, I murmured. And you were right, he said. His voice lowered, threading through the cool air with something close to reverence. Tell me, Jordan, did you ever end up working with Ghost Viper? I stiffened almost imperceptibly. Of all the people at Pinecrest, only he would know enough to ask. Only he would understand the consequences of an answer. I didn't reply. He nodded as if that silence confirmed everything. They thought you disappeared, he said, eyes still fixed on the tree line. Some of them said you wasted your potential. Law school dropout, army grunt. But I always knew better. My throat tightened. You did? Of course. He turned to face me fully. You were never built for applause, Jordan. You were built for consequence. The words sank into my chest like a slow-burning ember. Consequence. Not success. Not validation. Consequence. He studied my face, eyes narrowing as if reading lines of code beneath my skin. I taught history for 40 years. Saw thousands of bright minds come through that classroom. Kids who wanted to be remembered. You. His gaze softened. You never cared if they remembered. You just wanted the world to survive long enough for remembering to matter. I swallowed hard, feeling the tightness ease just enough to let in his words. Whatever they need you for tonight, he said, tapping his fingers lightly against the stone railing. Remember this. You are not defined by the rooms you walk out of. You are defined by the worlds you keep standing. For the first time that evening, the tension coiled in my shoulders, loosened. Not gone, never gone, but loosened enough to let me breathe without bracing for impact. I used to wish I could teach you ambition, he continued, half smiling. But now I see you just chose a different kind. We stood in silence, the moonlight washing over us in soft silver. Inside, applause rose again as Lena's speech reached its final crescendo. I imagined her closing line something powerful and self-assured, designed for cameras and LinkedIn reels. For a second, I wondered if she ever felt this quiet peace, this sense of certainty that came not from praise, but from knowing the work you do saves lives no one will ever know needed saving. Professor Halloran pushed his glasses up his nose. Should go back in, he said, voice reluctant. My wife still believes I can't be trusted near the dessert table unsupervised. I smiled. Tell her she's right. He laughed low and genuine, then reached out and placed a hand lightly on my forearm. His palm was cool, his grip firm, despite the tremor in his fingers. Stay safe out there, Jordan, he said, looking me straight in the eyes. Not just tonight. Always. Always, I echoed. He released my arm and turned, shuffling back into the ballroom with quiet dignity. The glass door closed behind him, sealing off the lights, music, and curated applause. I was alone again on the balcony, the moon, my only witness. I stood there for a moment longer, feeling the echo of his words in my bones. You are not defined by the rooms you walk out of. You are defined by the worlds you keep standing. My phone buzzed again, vibrating against the stone ledge where I'd set it down. I picked it up, reading the new message. Intel streams. Merlin breach escalation. Extraction request pending. I closed my eyes, breathing in the pine-scented darkness. When I opened them, the decision was made. Refusal was never truly an option. It was time to move. The helicopter blades cut the night sky into roaring fragments as we approached the Pentagon landing pad. I sat strapped into the jump seat headset, pressed against my ears, hair whipping around my face, despite the tight braid. The pilot's voice crackled through comms. ETA 2 minutes. General. Copy, I replied, eyes scanning the blackness beyond the cockpit windows. Somewhere beneath us, the city slept, unaware of the breach threatening to fracture everything they trusted. By the time my boots hit the tarmac, Colonel Simmons was waiting. His posture was ramrod straight despite the late-hour uniform, immaculate chest gleaming with ribbons. He saluted sharply as I approached. "Ma'am," he said, voice clipped with urgency. "Merlin protocol escalation. Joint Chiefs awaiting an ops briefing too." I returned the salute, walking beside him as we entered through the side security door. The fluorescent-lit hallways of the Pentagon swallowed us whole each step, echoing off linoleum floors waxed to mirror shine. Faces blurred past intelligence officers with tight jaws, tech specialists clutching clipboards, Marines guarding every junction. Inside the operations briefing room, 6 screens glowed with overlapping threat matrices, satellite images, and live code scrolls. General Monroe stood at the head of the table, broad, shouldered and silent until I entered. His deep-set eyes flicked to mine with an unspoken command focus. "Williams," he said, nodding once. "Pull up a seat." I sat. The air smelled of stale coffee and cold metal. Colonel Simmons passed me a secure tablet. Data streams already open. Merlin breach confirmed origin. Point Baltic server farm. Multiple infiltration vectors. Rapid escalation. "We've been chasing phantom signatures for 12 hours, Monroe began, voice gravelly. "Cyber Command has identified at least 2 internal actors feeding the breach." Names I asked. He hesitated. "One confirmed. Deputy Director Lena Williams, DOJ Western Cyber Oversight." My chest tightened. I forced myself to breathe evenly. "My sister," I said flatly. "Yes," Monroe replied, ignoring the flicker in my tone. "And the second actor remains masked. Ghost Viper believes it's an embedded NATO partner. They need your eyes on the intercept vectors before ZO400. My fingers tightened around the tablet. On-screen code flickered in pulsing red and orange like arterial bleeds under X-ray. Across the room, an analyst I recognized, Lieutenant Hannah Park Ghost Viper, embedded ops, looked up and met my gaze. She gave a small nod, a silent, "We've got your back." We'd served together in Jordan 3 years ago, neutralizing a cyber attack that threatened to shut down refugee medical grids in under an hour. She had steady hands, quick reflexes, and a brain built for layered logic under fire. An ally. On the far side, another figure shifted uncomfortably. Jason. He stood near the exit suit. Wrinkled hair mussed from running his hand through it too many times. He shouldn't be here, but something in his eyes told me he had information. Enemy or asset, I hadn't decided yet. "General Williams," he began, voice hoarse. "I need to speak to you. It's about Lena. There's something you don't know." Monroe cut him off with a sharp wave. "Later. Right now we need Williams on Merlin. Park, bring up the full vector overlay." Screens shifted. The room dimmed, lit only by the bloom of projected data across steel walls. I focused on the flickering breach patterns. They spiraled outward in rapid curls, each line a possible entry into the system. Each pulse a threat to global stability. My mind shifted gears, filing Lena away for later. Grief and betrayal could wait. Duty could not. I spoke without looking up. "This isn't just a data heist," I said. "They're building a disinformation cascade. Civilian grid infiltration tied to NATO proxy states. They want chaos before containment. Park nodded fingers flying across the keyboard, translating my theory into immediate actionable code. Simmons leaned forward, face pale. "Can you stop it?" I didn't blink. "No, but I can contain it." Behind me, Jason exhaled shakily. "Jordan." I raised a hand, silencing him. My eyes remained locked on the breach schematic. Tests, allies, enemies. In that room, they surrounded me like chess pieces, waiting to reveal their true forms. Some would hold the line, some would falter, some would betray. But I didn't need their certainty. I only needed their time. The operations room dimmed, lit only by the soft green glow of tactical maps and cascading code. I sat motionless, spine straight against the steel-backed chair, fingers laced on the cold metal table. The edge bit lightly into my skin, grounding me. On the screen before me, Merlin's breach schematic sprawled outward like a malignant vascular system. Infection lines branching into civilian grid nodes, the weakest points in any infrastructure. I inhaled slowly. The room smelled of burnt coffee in Park's paper cup, the faint ozone of heated circuit boards, the sharper scent of Simmons's gun oil. It all blurred into a sense memory of Kabul underground ops rooms, dust sifting from concrete beams, tension vibrating in recycled air. Park stood just behind my shoulder, typing furiously. Her voice was husky with exhaustion after 18 straight hours online. Here she murmured, tapping a pulsing red icon on the map overlay. The internal vector starts from the Baltic cluster tunnels, through an NGO shell server, then forks 3 ways. One branch into Oslo, one into Warsaw, and... She paused. Her finger hovered over the last node, blinking red. Washington, D.C. I nodded once. Eyes locked on the glowing threat lines. Layers of encryption overlapped in my mind. Possibilities collapsing into probabilities and then into inevitabilities. And in the center of it all was a name rising from the code, like blood through water. Deputy Director Lena Williams. My chest tightened, but only for a moment. Park saw it. She didn't ask. She knew better. General Monroe stepped closer, placing a heavy hand on the back of my chair. His grip radiated authority, tempered with fatigue. A quiet weight that didn't demand obedience, so much as remind you it was expected. "Jordan," he said softly. "If we expose Lena as the vector origin, the media will explode within 5 hours. Maybe less." "I know," I replied, my voice flat. It wasn't surprise tightening my chest. It was the memory of Lena at 8, clutching my arm during thunderstorms, her face buried against my side. The memory of her at 28 clinking glasses at my brief homecoming dinner, eyes darting to make sure her photographer caught the moment. The memory of her watching me in uniform for the first time. There was no jealousy there, only ambition, distilled into something pure and cold. Behind me, Jason shifted uncomfortably. Suit-wrinkled tie loosened like a noose he no longer believed in. I gestured at him without turning. "Speak." He swallowed, eyes flicking to Monroe, then back to me. "Lena contacted me 3 months ago." He began, voice trembling. "She said she wanted to clean up your narrative. She asked me to delete the original yearbook files and replace them with an edited set. She even sent an email to the school board pretending it was from you, asking them to remove your name from the honors wall." His words didn't wound. Not after the battlefields I've walked. But they landed heavy nonetheless, like the final piece falling into place. Simmons sucked in a sharp breath behind Jason. Park glanced at me, then back at her screens, fingers still flying. On the monitors, threat lines pulsed. Node Warsaw, Node Oslo, Node DC. There was no way to cut off Oslo without leaving DC exposed. No way to sever Warsaw without keeping Oslo open. Only one option remained. Park spoke it aloud. "If we kill the Baltic origin, ma'am, It collapses the entire vector tree. But it also confirms Lena as the breach origin. I nodded. The room went silent. Even Monroe released his grip from my chair. They knew what this meant. Exposing Lena didn't just neutralize the breach. It detonated my family in the process. My fingers curled tighter around each other. Memories flickered Lena hugging me goodbye when I left for West Point, her tears soaking my collarbone. The way she never wrote back, the way her podcast voice, dripping casual derision, had become an echo chamber of curated power. Jason whispered desperate Jordan. There must be another way there isn't. I cut him off. Eyes still fixed on the screens. Park, ma'am. Lock the Baltic node. Collapse all vectors. Prepare a full breach attribution report. And name Lena as the origin. For a beat, the room remained silent. Then Park's fingers moved swift and sure. Simmons radioed into the hall, summoning 2 teams of counter-cyber operatives. Jason sagged against the wall, shock written into the lines of his face. Monroe exhaled the sound heavy with consequence. This is who you are. Jordan, he said quietly, you've always known. I didn't look at him. I didn't need to. Because at the end of every operation beyond loyalty, beyond duty, there is only truth. And truth, like steel, cuts deepest when wielded without hesitation. I straightened my spine, feeling the cold metal beneath my fingertips, and said the words that had always defined me. Take me in. And into the darkness I went. The elevator descended in silence, the kind that hums in your teeth. Park stood beside me, eyes locked on her tablet as lines of code scrolled down the screen. Simmons waited near the panel, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. When the doors slid open, the sub-basement command center came into view. Walls lined with tactical screens, the air thrumming with electricity and hushed urgency. Analysts hunched over consoles, data streams pulsing in green, amber, and red. The room smelled of old coffee and ozone. My world. My cave. Monroe was already there, standing before the main display. A rotating schematic of Merlin's breach spun slowly behind him, each vector glowing like arteries, lit under contrast dye. He turned as I approached. It's confirmed, he said without preamble. Lena's credentials authenticated the Baltic shell. Whether she knew or not, she's the origin. I nodded, feeling the motion ripple down my spine, like steel setting into place. Then we sever. Park stepped forward, projecting her tablet onto the main display. We're ready. Once you confirm we initiate hard sever on the Baltic cluster, inject kill commands across the vector tree, and isolate node DC. It will take 30 seconds for the full cascade. Casualties, I asked. Her eyes flicked to mine. Minimal, ma'am. But Lena's career will flatline within the hour. DOJ clearance revoked, federal investigation automatic. My throat tightened for half a breath. Then I locked it down. There is no room for grief here. Only mission parameters. Only consequences. Monroe crossed his arms. You ready, General? I looked at the screens. At the world as it truly was, chaotic. Fragile, dependent on the silent choices of unseen hands. I thought of Lena standing on that ballroom stage, bathed in chandelier light and curated adoration. I thought of the little girl hiding behind me during storms, whispering, "Don't leave first." I spoke softly. "Initiate." Park's fingers flew across her tablet. The main screen flickered threat lines, pulsing faster, each vector responding to the kill command in bright, violent bursts of red. Code collapsed inward routes, sealing data corruption, halting mid-injection. Then node DC blinked green. Containment confirmed. Park breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. Applause rose in scattered bursts across the command center. Analysts slumped back, tension dissolving into relief. Monroe nodded once, sharp and proud. But I didn't move. I kept my eyes locked on the final status screen. Origin Deputy Director Lena Williams. Status breach attribution complete. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, reading the preview of a new encrypted message. From Ghost Viper, command target neutralized. Secondary objective pending. Eyes on Vector Beta, awaiting your authorization. Another mission. Another threat. Another cave, waiting to be entered. My pulse steadied, adrenaline settling into that cold, focused clarity I'd trained to summon on command. Behind me, Jason's voice broke the quiet. "Jordan." "What will you tell her?" I turned. His face was pale eyes, bloodshot with disbelief and grief that wasn't his to carry. I held his gaze evenly. "Nothing," I said. "There's nothing left to tell." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Park disconnected her tablet, stepping aside with silent efficiency. Simmons nodded, once eyes down. Monroe studied me for a moment longer, then clapped his hand on my shoulder. "Good work, General. The world sleeps because of people like you." I didn't respond. Instead, I looked at the breach schematic, now blacked out with a single green confirmation. Silence fell again, thick and humming with residual fear and reluctant victory. Because this was the ordeal. Not the severing of a breach, not the neutralization of a threat, but the acceptance that every time I stepped into the dark, I lost another piece of the light I came from. I exhaled slowly, letting that truth settle into my bones. And then I turned to face the next cave. The command center emptied out slowly. Analysts gathered their tablets and notebooks, filing out in hushed pairs, voices low with the exhausted tremor of adrenaline fading. Some murmured about coffee, some about sleep. A few allowed themselves the rare word, victory. The ever-present hum of the servers softened into a gentle background vibration like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Park powered down her console with deliberate precision, each movement heavy with fatigue. Her eyes were rimmed red from 20 hours straight on the Merlin intercept grid. But behind that, exhaustion glowed a fierce pride I'd always admired. "Ma'am," she said quietly, slipping her authentication card from the reader. The ops team just uploaded final confirmation. "Merlin is stable. Threat neutralized. NATO partners secured. Civilian networks uncompromised." "Good work, Park." I replied, voice steady. And I meant it with my whole chest. She hesitated, as though holding back words too tender for a war room. Then she gave a small nod, almost a bow, before turning and disappearing through the security doors. Simmons followed her out, silent as ever, his bulk casting long shadows against the flickering monitors. Then it was just Monroe and me alone in the dim green glow. He stood with his arms crossed over his barrel chest, fatigue pulling down his lined face. But his eyes stayed sharp, measuring, watching, judging. "You did it, Jordan," he said finally. I said nothing, only loosened my clenched fists beneath the table, feeling blood return to my fingers in aching warmth. He continued, voice lower now, almost gentle. "She'll never recover from this. DOJ will revoke everything. Media will eviscerate her. The committee is unanimous." "I know," I replied, forcing the words out evenly past the tightness in my throat. He studied me for a long, silent beat. Then almost reluctantly, he added, "She chose her path." "No." My whisper cut through the quiet hum. "She chose to erase mine. I chose to stop her." Silence pooled between us, humming with unspoken truths, the kind that have no place in official after-action reports. Finally, Monroe exhaled heavily and reached into his inner jacket pocket. He placed a small black velvet box on the table in front of me. Its gold seal caught the console light, gleaming like an ember in the dark. Before the breach escalated, he said, clearing his throat roughly, "I received this, direct from the president's office. I was asked to deliver it to you in person." I stared at the box but didn't move. "What is it?" His lips curved into a faint smile, the first I'd seen from him in over a decade of joint briefings and classified missions. "Your Medal of Honor. Approved. Full public ceremony on the South Lawn next week. Full honors. The works. The words detonated silently through my chest. My ribs constricted around breath I couldn't quite pull in. Slowly I reached forward, flicking open the lid with a trembling thumb. Inside, nestled against deep navy velvet, lay the medallion. Simple, heavy, undeniable. For a long moment, the room blurred at its edges. In that hazed perimeter of memory, I saw myself at 17 stepping onto the dawn bus to West Point with a duffel bag and a spine full of grit. I saw myself at 27 hunched over satellite feeds in Kabul, giving the final go order for an op that would never be declassified. I saw myself just hours ago standing alone on that balcony, the echo of Lena's applause behind glass, while my phone pinged with threats only I could neutralize. My fingers hovered over the metal, but did not touch it. Monroe's voice softened, carrying a weight that felt almost paternal. You earned this a long time ago, Jordan. It's only now the world is ready to see it. I closed the box gently, hearing the quiet click of the latch. Final. Absolute. I looked up, meeting his gaze squarely. Permission to stand down for 12 hours, sir. His smile faded into something deeper, something solemn. He nodded once. Granted. I rose, slipping the metal box into my clutch. Its weight bent the thin leather inward, pressing cold and certain against my hip. As I walked toward the exit, the rhythmic thud of my boots echoing softly across the command floor, Monroe called after me. General. I paused in the doorway, turning just enough to meet his eyes. He watched me with that steady, unflinching gaze, arms still crossed like he was bracing himself against the truth he was about to speak. Don't forget, he said quietly, his voice carrying more gravity than any medal or title could hold. You are the sword, not the ceremony. I held his gaze for a single silent heartbeat. Then I nodded. Understood. And with that, I stepped out into the empty hallway. The lights flickered overhead in muted fluorescence. The air smelled of printer ink, cold metal, and freshly waxed floors. Each footfall landed soft but resolute, echoing back at me like a steady drumbeat. In my clutch, the metal pressed into my side, with a silent promise you were not erased. Your name will outlive every lie. But deep down beneath the iron calm, I knew the real reward was never metal or ceremonies or polished speeches. It was this, that when the world called, I answered. Every time, without fail, without flinching. And that, I told myself as I disappeared down the silent corridor, was enough. More than enough. The sky over Arlington was gunmetal gray by the time I stepped out of the Pentagon. Dawn was still an hour away, but the horizon glowed with the first promise of light. I walked across the plaza alone, the Medal of Honor box tucked deep in my clutch, its corners digging into my palm with every step. Each step felt heavier, anchored not by fatigue, but by the knowledge of what I carried and what it meant. My phone buzzed again, vibrating sharply against my hip. A text from Melissa lit up the screen in quiet urgency. Are you okay? I saw the DOJ announcement. Call me. I typed back quickly, my thumb moving with clipped precision. Not yet. Soon. Then I slid the phone back into my pocket as the wind cut across the plaza, cold and bracing, carrying the faint scent of jet fuel and damp concrete. Around me, the Pentagon stirred to life, early shift Marines, crossing the lawn in tight silent formations. A janitor pushing a cart stacked with disinfectant bottles and rags. A lone sparrow hopping between concrete seams in search of crumbs left behind by people too busy to notice. For a moment, I just stood there. There is a loneliness in victory that no one warns you about. They tell you about pride, about relief, about the weight lifting from your shoulders, but they never tell you about the silence that follows. The knowledge that your choices, your sacrifices, your scars are yours alone to bear invisible medals pinned to skin, no one else will ever touch. The Medal of Honor box pressed into my palm again. I gripped it tighter, grounding myself in the unbreakable reality of its presence. Then I crossed the plaza to the staff lot, where my black government SUV waited, idling softly under sodium lights. The driver, a young airman with a pale buzz cut, and eyes too earnest for the hour, jumped out to open the door for me. His movements crisp despite the lingering fog of sleep. "Morning, ma'am," he said, voice pitched respectfully. "Where to?" I paused, my hand resting on the doorframe, the cold metal biting into my palm. Where to? Back to my quarters to shower off the scent of adrenaline, stale coffee, and classified fear. Back to my office to debrief Merlin's neutralization and prepare for the next breach. Back to the South Lawn next week to stand in front of cameras, receiving applause for operations no civilian would ever understand. But first there was something else I needed to do. Something more urgent than sleep, more necessary than praise. "Fort Liberty," I said quietly, each syllable landing like a command, issued from the marrow. He blinked once, eyes flicking up to meet mine in the rearview mirror. "Ma'am," he asked, uncertain. "Fort Liberty," I repeated. "Cadet Lecture Hall. I'll only need an hour." "Yes, ma'am." He shut the door behind me with a muted thunk, sealing me into the dim leather silence. As the SUV pulled away from the Pentagon, I leaned my head against the cold window, feeling the vibration of the engine reverberate through bone. Outside Arlington, blurred past in gray-blue strokes, quiet neighborhoods still dark with sleep, shuttered diners glowing faint neon rows of brick townhouses, standing sentinel against the coming dawn. My reflection gazed back at me in fragments, fractured by streetlights and traffic signals, each sliver revealing a different truth. The officer, the sister, the ghost. I thought of Lena, her voice threading through podcasts with clinical charm, dissecting leadership like an academic specimen. I thought of her tears as a child, her ambition as a woman, her downfall now echoing through DOJ channels and news tickers like a broken hymn. I thought of the words Professor Halloran once told me in a quiet corridor at West Point, words that had anchored me through every darkness since, "You are not defined by the rooms you walk out of. You are defined by the worlds you keep standing." The SUV turned onto the highway ramp, merging with a slow trickle of military convoys heading south. I closed my eyes, feeling the metal box heavy in my lap, its promise pressing down on me even as it lifted something, within something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose, direction, certainty. No parade awaited me at Fort Liberty. No cameras, no dignitaries shaking my hand with forced warmth. Just 30 cadets in stiff-pressed uniforms, notebooks, open on polished desks, eyes wide, and waiting to be taught something real about leadership sacrifice and the quiet burden of command. I exhaled long and steady, feeling my breath coil and settle deep in my chest. This was the road back, not to comfort or rest, but to purpose, to legacy, to the quiet truth I had always known and would never abandon. Some warriors fight for glory, some fight for survival, and some of us fight so that others never have to know war at all. As the first pale light of morning cracked along the horizon, casting thin gold across the asphalt, I opened my eyes and looked straight ahead. "Drive faster," I told the airman, my voice calm and sure. Because dawn was coming, because cadets were waiting, because there was still work to be done, and because for warriors like me, there is always work to be done. The lecture hall at Fort Liberty was nothing like the Pentagon's war rooms. Beige walls, scuffed linoleum floors, fluorescent lights buzzing softly overhead. Yet as I stepped onto the low podium, a hush fell over the 30 cadets seated before me. Their uniforms were pressed crisp boots, polished to mirror shine eyes, alert with a hunger that only youth and purpose can conjure. I set my clutch on the podium, feeling the heavy metal box inside shift slightly. For a moment, I just looked at them. Rows of young men and women who would inherit the battlefields and negotiation tables I had spent my life crossing. They didn't know the real cost yet, but they would. "Good morning," I began, my voice echoing against the tired plaster walls. "Good morning, ma'am," they chorused, voices tight with discipline. "Today's topic," I continued, scanning their eager faces, "is ethical leadership in asymmetric environments." But before we begin, I paused, letting the silence expand just enough to anchor their attention. "Tell me this. Why do we lead A-Beat?" A cadet in the third row, freckles scattered across her nose, raised her hand sharply. "Ma'am, to ensure mission success." I nodded. "And why else?" Another cadet, broad-shouldered, his hair shaved close, spoke up. "To protect those under our command." "Good," I said softly. "But what if no one ever knows what you did? What if leadership means carrying decisions so heavy they silence you forever? Would you still lead then?" The room went utterly quiet. Even the hum of the lights felt distant. Their eyes widened, flicking to each other, to me, to the insignia on my shoulder. I saw myself in them, not just at West Point, full of theory and competition, but at 17, standing outside my high school reunion, feeling invisible under chandeliers, meant to blind rather than illuminate. I reached into my clutch and withdrew the Medal of Honor box. Their eyes followed every movement. I opened it, revealing the gold star gleaming against navy velvet. Gasps rose, quiet, but genuine. "This medal isn't mine?" I said. My voice didn't tremble, though I felt something loosen in my chest. "It belongs to every agent who never came home, every soldier who never got the mission debrief, because the mission was buried. It belongs to truth, and truth is never silent. It's simply waiting for someone brave enough to speak it." I closed the box gently, the click sharp in the silent room. Leadership, I continued, isn't about being right or being seen. It's about choosing to carry the weight anyway, even when your knees shake, even when the world calls you invisible. The cadet with freckles swallowed hard. Her voice was small but unbreakable. "Ma'am, did your knees ever shake?" I met her gaze evenly, letting the memory wash through me. The drone strikes, the closed caskets, the silent helicopter extractions at dawn. "They still do," I whispered. "But I stand anyway." The class sat straighter, notebooks forgotten. Eyes shining with something deeper than ambition, understanding. I exhaled slowly, feeling a warmth spread across my chest that wasn't pride, but something stronger. Acceptance. Redemption. Resurrection. The resurrection wasn't in the medal. It was here in this room, in these eyes, in knowing that everything I'd carried, every silence, every scar, every unspoken truth, had led to this moment, passing the sword to hands that would carry it forward. Because someday they too would stand alone in a dark room, facing choices no one would ever understand. And they would remember this day. They would remember that even silent warriors still rise. The sun had climbed high by the time I left Fort Liberty. Its light spilled across the parade grounds, gilding the rows of flagpoles, and the cadets drilling in tight, flawless formations. Their rifle barrels glinted under the unrelenting blue sky, their voices sharp and certain as they called cadence into the morning air. I walked alone back to my SUV, feeling the echo of their chants vibrating softly in my chest, like a memory of discipline I would never forget. The Medal of Honor box was tucked back into my clutch, heavier now with meaning than with metal. Its corners pressed against my palm with each step, a quiet reminder of the burden it represented and the promise it held. The driver rose silently to open my door. As we pulled away, I watched the training fields recede. Behind us, the neat rows of cadets shrinking into distant, disciplined lines. I felt something loosen in my chest, unwinding from the tight coil it had been wound into for decades. It wasn't relief. It wasn't pride. Just release. My phone buzzed in my lap. Its vibration rattling against the metal box. A message from Melissa lit the screen. Her name familiar and grounding. Call me when you can. There's a press briefing this afternoon about your award. They want a quote. I didn't reply. Not yet. The world could wait another hour. Instead, I leaned forward and spoke softly to the driver. Take a detour. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, brows lifting slightly. Yes, ma'am. We turned off the highway into quiet suburban streets, lined with mailboxes and faded shutters, the asphalt cracked with summer heat. The houses looked smaller than I remembered, their brick facades dulled by sun, and time their lawns patchy with drought-browned grass. But the old oak tree still stood at the corner, its massive roots pushing up the concrete, its branches arching wide overhead in a cathedral of green. Stop here, I said. He eased the SUV to the curb. I stepped out into the morning heat, cicadas buzzing like static high in the canopy. For a long moment, I simply stood under that tree, letting the smell of sap, dry earth and sun, warmed bark fill my lungs. Here was where Lena and I played hide and seek until dusk, her laughter pealing like wind chimes through the humid evenings. Here was where I practiced saluting with a broom handle at 8 years old, eyes fixed on an imagined horizon, dreaming of duty and valor and purpose. Here was where I once promised myself I would do something that mattered, even if no one ever knew. I reached into my clutch and withdrew the metal box. Slowly, deliberately, I opened it, letting the sun catch on the gold and reflect warm light into my eyes. For a moment, the brilliance blurred my vision, washing the world in gold. Then I closed it again with a quiet, definitive click, and I smiled. Because this standing here beneath the oak with cicadas buzzing and memory alive in every leaf, this was the elixir. Not the medal, not the ceremony, not the headlines or the archived citations. This, the knowledge that the child who stood here decades ago barefoot and saluting shadows had kept her promise. She had fought her wars. She had carried her silences. And she had returned with something worth giving back. My phone buzzed again, urgent this time. A secure ping from Ghost Viper Command scrolled across the screen in stark encrypted text. General Vector Beta escalation confirmed. Awaiting orders. Priority 1. I read it once. Then again. I felt the familiar steel settle into my spine, my pulse steadying to the rhythm of duty. I slipped the phone back into my clutch. My smile didn't fade. There would always be another threat, another breach, another darkness to step into. That was the cost of living as a fulcrum, the pivot point no one sees until the world starts to tilt. But today I realized something deeper. I wasn't just the sword anymore. I was the hand that wielded it, the mind that guided it, the soul that chose when to sheath it. I turned back to the SUV, my boots crunching softly over the dry grass and fallen acorns. As I climbed in, the driver met my eyes in the rearview mirror waiting. "Back to the Pentagon, ma'am," he asked. I shook my head, once slowly feeling the quiet power in the word as it left my lips. "No," I said softly. "Forward." And as the car pulled away, the old oak tree receding behind me, I felt the sun on my face and the metal pressing against my heart. Not as a burden this time, not as a weight to bear alone, but as a reminder that I was never invisible. I was the light in the dark. I was the blade in the silence. I was the sentinel who stood when no one else could. And I was going home, wherever duty called me next. A week later, I stood on the south lawn of the White House. Rows of white folding chairs lined the grass in perfect military symmetry. Flags snapped softly in the summer breeze. Generals in dress blues, senators in tailored suits, cadets in crisp grays all turned their eyes toward the small stage where I waited. The president approached me, his expression solemn kind. He placed the Medal of Honor around my neck with practiced care. Cameras clicked in a quiet, respectful chorus. Applause rose, steady grounded, carrying not celebration, but something weightier, recognition. As he stepped back to the podium, his voice carried across the lawn. Today we honor Lieutenant General Jordan Williams, a sentinel who served not for glory, but for the silent safety of millions. A leader whose choices were hidden, but whose impact is unerasable. I stood at attention, the medal warm against my chest. In the front row, I saw Melissa, her eyes bright with pride. Beside her sat Lena. Her hair was tied back simply, her suit understated. Her eyes were rimmed with fatigue, and something deeper, something like humility. When the ceremony ended, guests rose to mingle in hushed reverence. Lena approached me, slowly stopping just a foot away. For a moment, we stood in silence, the breeze lifting the edges of her blazer. "I tried to erase you," she whispered, her voice breaking on the words. "But you never disappeared." I looked at her, then truly looked. Beneath the calculated ambition, beneath the polished confidence, was my sister, the little girl who once begged me to stay until the thunder ended. "No," I said softly. "I was just serving where you couldn't see me." Her breath hitched and tears welled in her eyes. She nodded once quickly, as though afraid they would spill if she moved too slowly. Then she reached out and took my hand, squeezing it hard. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice shaking. I squeezed back. "I know." A voice crackled in my earpiece. Ghost Viper command. Another escalation. Another darkness waiting for me. I turned toward the east wing, feeling the weight of the medal settle onto my shoulders. It didn't bow me down. It anchored me. Before I walked away, I looked back at Lena. She stood alone on the grass, the morning sun catching in her hair, her eyes following me with something that looked like love. And in that moment, under the clear blue sky of a capital I had spent my life protecting, I felt it fully. I was not just a warrior, not just a sister, not just a leader unseen. I was legacy. And legacies, no matter how quietly carried, never disappear. This is a story about a woman who spent her whole life serving in silence. Jordan Williams was never the loudest in the room, never the one chasing applause or recognition. She chose duty over comfort, truth over praise, and carried secrets that kept millions safe secrets. No one would ever know. Her sister tried to erase her name from history to keep the spotlight for herself. But in the end, Jordan proved something deeper, that real power isn't about titles, medals, or social status. It's about the quiet choices you make when no one is watching, and the worlds you keep standing because of them. If you were Jordan, would you reveal the truth and risk destroying your family, or stay silent to protect them? Tell me below. Your thoughts might inspire my next story.